Creating extraordinary success in business and life is absolutely possible. That means more income, more freedom, and more energy for what you value most without the hustle or burnout. I'm Laura Flood, certified success and high performance coach, CEO for over 30 years, and a multiple seven-figure entrepreneur. I've built a profitable, sustainable business while prioritizing my family, my health, and my happiness, and I'm here to help you do the same. This is the Redefining Success podcast, where I'll share the strategies, tools, and the mindset shifts to help you grow with intention, live a life you love, and create lasting happiness, wealth, and freedom without losing yourself in the process. Let's dive in. Hey there, welcome back to the Redefining Success podcast. I was looking at my calendar recently, and everything on it made sense. The work that needed to get done was there. The conversations that I was planning on having were scheduled, and things were moving forward as they should. So from the outside, it looked like it was going to be a really great week. And then I had this moment where I realized that I hadn't fully chosen it. I was in it, doing everything I needed to do, but I never slowed down enough to think ahead and decide how I actually wanted to use my time. There's a real difference between moving through your time and deciding and directing it. And from what I have found is once you start paying attention to that difference, it shows up everywhere. When your time is predetermined, your day has a certain clarity. You move from one thing to the next really focused, and you don't have part of your attention pulling you forward into what's coming later because you already know. When you don't take the time to intentionally plan your week, it feels like there's always something slightly ahead of you. You're thinking about what's coming next, or you're holding on to things that you haven't fully resolved and tracking decisions that never really closed. And I want to talk about this today because it doesn't always feel overwhelming. It just feels like your attention is always partially engaged somewhere else. Most people don't question this because nothing looks off from the outside. Their business is working and they know how to handle what's in front of them. So they keep moving and assume that this is just part of being busy or what comes with being successful. What they don't see is how much of their time is still being decided while they're in it, and how much of their attention is tied up in things that were never fully settled. And once you see that, the question changes. It really stops being about managing your time better during the day, and you start to really think about how your time is being decided before the day ever starts. Let's talk about deciding the week before it actually begins. Because when you sit down at the beginning of your week, if you actually use that time to decide and not to react, this is where everything starts to change. What I see is most people open their calendar or their to-do list and immediately start organizing what's already there. They're looking at everything that carried over from the week before, things that came in over the weekend, and all of the things that they think they should get done. And then they go to work on trying to fit it all together. That's not deciding your week. That's managing what already exists. So deciding your week, it looks very different. You want to take the time to put what's most important to you in your calendar first. I like to schedule all of my family time, everything my kids have going on, games, whatever it is, workouts, date nights. I schedule all of that in first. I think it's so important to schedule in time for yourself and also schedule some fun into your week. And then start plugging in work. What are your recurring meetings with your team or your committed blocks of time for your focused work? I really recommend having at least 4 days a week with a 2-hour block reserved for your most important work to move your business forward. So that is 8 hours of uninterrupted work every week without any distractions. You want to take the time to sit down before anything has started pulling your attention so you can ask yourself what actually matters right now. And also ask yourself, what result would make this week feel complete if it were done? What would you need to accomplish to make it feel like you had an amazing week? That question it really forces clarity. It also forces you to choose because there's always more than one thing that could move you forward. This is where I see so many high achievers hesitate because to us, every option feels valid. Everything feels important. You could follow up with clients, or you could work on something completely new, or spend time refining something that already exists. You could take advantage of an opportunity that just came in. And all of those things make sense. That's why it's so difficult. And this is also where your time starts to get scattered because instead of choosing one direction, you're trying to keep them all moving forward. What that looks like in real life is you start your day with one intention, something else comes in, so you shift to that. And by the end of the day, you've touched so many things without actually moving anything forward in a meaningful way. You stay busy, but you don't feel the kind of progress that you expected. When you decide your week ahead of time, you remove that pattern. You choose one result that matters enough to take priority over everything else for the week. And then you build your time around that. So that doesn't mean that nothing else gets done. It just means that everything else gets filtered through that one decision. If it supports that result, it stays on your calendar. And if it doesn't, it either gets reduced or it waits. That's what creates direction. And without that decision, your week is shaped by whatever shows up instead of what you chose. So once you've made that decision, the next thing that happens is internal resistance. And this is where constraint becomes uncomfortable for all of us. Because even when you know what matters, there's still a part of you that wants to keep everything else moving. You don't want to lose momentum or miss an opportunity. And you really don't want to feel like you've left something behind. So you keep it all active and open. And this is where a lot of people stay stuck without realizing it. Because from the outside, it looks like they're doing a lot. They're working, responding, and making progress in multiple areas. But their attention is divided in a way that prevents anything from building any real traction. I remember a period where I had several different things I wanted to grow at the same time, and I was making progress in all of them, but none of them were moving at the pace that I wanted. And it really took me a minute to see that the issue wasn't effort, it was my focus. Every time that I would switch between those things, I was restarting my thinking and splitting my attention. And that really slowed everything down. But when I chose one direction and stayed with it long enough to complete it, the difference was immediate. The work got easier and my decisions got clearer. And the results started to build in a way that felt more aligned than the effort that I was putting in. Constraint doesn't take things away from you. It allows your attention to concentrate so you can actually produce something. So once you've chosen your focus, the next step is to give it a place in your week. And this is where structure starts to change how your time feels. I think that most people resist structure because they associate it with losing flexibility. But what I see happen is actually the opposite. Structure removes the need to keep thinking about everything. When something has a place in your schedule, it stops following you around mentally. You're not reminding yourself of it throughout the day or wondering when you're going to get to it. You already know, and that's what creates space. And this is where I see a lot of people unintentionally create pressure for themselves because they build their schedule around their work and then they try to fit their life around it. So their week fills up and they're trying to carve out space for everything else. But when you flip that and you decide your life first and then place your work inside of your calendar, your schedule starts to reflect what actually matters. Your time becomes so much more intentional and your work becomes more focused because it has to fit inside what you've already chose. I also want to talk today a little bit about indecision and how that is the hidden drain on your time. As a new week begins, this is where most people lose control of their time without realizing it. They start adjusting everything and they start to move things based on how they feel, what seems easier or what looks more interesting in the moment. And every time they do that, they bring that decision back into their awareness. So now they're thinking about it again, and it's taking up more space again. And that process repeats itself throughout the week. Indecision doesn't always show up as not knowing what to do. Sometimes it shows up as going back to something that was already decided. Taking that time to reconsider something or tweaking it or just keeping those options open. And every time you do that, you interrupt your own momentum. You take something that was already handled and you make it active in your mind again. At some point, your decisions have to stay decided. You made that decision when you were clear, when you were spending that time planning and focus for the week. So you don't need to keep checking it. You just want to move forward and let the results show you what needs to change. And that's what creates speed. We also have to talk about my hell yes theory. So many people mentioned it to me after the last episode when I talked about it briefly then. So, the hell yes theory will protect your time and energy in a very real way. So, for me, anything that goes on my calendar, it has to be a hell yes. If it's not a hell yes, it doesn't get time on my schedule. And it's important to know that you can just say no. You don't need to explain yourself or justify it because there's nothing worse than saying yes to something out of obligation or because you don't want to disappoint someone. And then you find yourself spending all of the time leading up to it feeling annoyed or resentful. So for me, it has to be a hell yes. And I would love for you to consider applying this as well, because when you do this consistently, your schedule reflects what you actually chose, not what you felt obligated to do. And this makes life so much easier and so much more fun. I want to talk about self-trust for a minute. This is where everything either stabilizes or, for many high achievers, it continues to feel inconsistent. What I see is most people have a very high standard for how they show up for other people. If they say they're going to do something, they do it. If someone is counting on them, they absolutely always follow through. There's no question there. But many times when it comes to themselves, that standard shifts. And the time that they set aside for themselves or, something personal gets moved. Or the decisions they made, they get adjusted. Over time, when you keep doing that, that creates a pattern where your own commitments are optional. And if your plan is optional, your time will always feel unstable. At some point, your plan has to become something that you follow. You made the decision when you were clear and focused on planning your week. You don't need to renegotiate it. You need to follow through. And that's where trust gets built. And that trust, it's really what allows your time to feel consistent, and it helps you actually feel accomplished at the end of the day and at the end of each week. So once you decide on something, you have to start taking action and stay in motion until you get a result. Not until it feels perfect or until you feel ready. You have to stay with it until you get a result, because that result will give you feedback, and that feedback will tell you what needs to change. A lot of time is wasted trying to get things perfect before you start. And when you start to move sooner, you learn sooner. You see what works and what doesn't, and then you adjust from there. So even when something doesn't work, it moves you forward. You know what they say, done is better than perfect. And failing is just part of the process. And over the long term, failing really saves time. When you step back and look at all of this together, the shift is simple. Your weeks go so much better when you take the time to decide your week before it begins. So I want you to choose one main result or goal and give that your attention this week. Keep your commitments and decisions and follow through on what you planned, especially things for yourself. You really want to take action and move things forward until you get a result and protect your time with very clear standards. That's what will change how your week feels. It's not more time or having less to do. It's just a different way of operating within the time you already have. This is what we accomplish inside Redefining Success coaching and courses. If you're ready for that, the details are in the show notes. Your time is already being used. What changes everything is whether or not you decide how it's used before your week begins. Thanks again for spending time with me today. I'll see you in the next episode.